In the tradition of Malcolm X, peace be unto you. What you're looking at is an ant colony in distress. The queen has died or been taken, and that has caused extreme dysfunction in the colony. Over time, this particular colony of ants will die. Our societies worldwide are becoming increasingly dysfunctional as well. The primary cause of that dysfunction is climate change. If you've been paying attention to the news, then again, you may have noted all the fires in the western part of the United States, floods in Kentucky, extreme heat in Washington, the state of Washington and Oregon, and of course, throughout Europe. Those conditions are markers underscoring the projections that ecologists and meteorologists and geologists have been making for over 4 decades. They've been saying that if we don't get a grip on our use of fossil fuels, that we were going to cause the ecosystems that we depend upon to break down, and in many cases, to stop. Now add to that warfare and the threat of war, and even the threat of nuclear war, and the anxiety levels of people living everywhere in the world, including food anxiety, is causing human societies to behave just like that ant colony. I want to ask some questions in my short talk. If you had to make a decision under extreme circumstances, under chaotic and catastrophic circumstances, what would you decide if life on earth literally hung in the balance? If in order to save the planet and the ecosystems and the human species, Homo Sapian sapien, what decision would you make in order to save the earth and the human species? That's my question to you in this talk. And understanding that we cannot or would not be able to save everyone. Decades ago, a book written by the Club of Rome entitled Limits to Growth made it very clear that there is no such thing as infinite growth or infinite progress. Those have been concepts invented by the capitalist economy that has dominated what world view we have and how we live our lives. But given climate change and the severity of climate change and the fact that we are near the 1.5 degrees Celsius increase since 1850 or the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the critical point beyond which there's nothing that can be done to mitigate the environmental collapse that we see beginning now. There is no technological or technology that can reverse the ecological decay that has been set in motion. We are near 1.5. In fact, scientists project that by 2025, in 3 years, we will reach or go beyond the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature, average global temperature increase since 1850, or the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. It cannot be reversed. Even if there were ways to implement technology, there is no time left to do so. So, if you were in a position and had to make decisions to save humanity, radical decisions must be made, and they must be made now. The point that I want to underscore to you is this: if you wait, it'll be too late. We don't have another 10 years to make serious decisions about how we are going to mitigate the damage that climate change, global climate change, is going to have on humanity and all of the ecosystems that we depend upon. So I want to first talk about the possible scenario that could play out. This is one possible scenario that could play out if we don't make decisions now to do what we can to save humanity. Right now, there's about 8 billion people living on Earth, and demographers project that by 2050, there will be about 10 billion. I'm rounding up, 10 billion. And the science teaches us that it would take 4 planets, 4 Earths, for everyone on this earth to live the lifestyle that Americans have been living for the past 50 years. And of course, you know that is absolutely impossible. It has also been determined by calculations that the planet, the Earth, cannot sustain 11 billion plus human beings. That is the limit. That is the environmental limit that the planet has. That's its capacity, its carrying capacity. Beyond which, everything in the environment will resist any human biotic potential. It would feel as though the whole planet has turned against Homo Sapian to bring its numbers down. Of course, that would create a nightmare in our environments, in our societies worldwide. So if you had to make a decision, the final decision to save humanity, would it be one that called for a proportionate population reduction by each nation on Earth, that 2/3 of each nation's population would have to be eliminated in order to reduce the consumption of all the things, all the products that are tied to the use of fossil fuels, which of course at the end of the day results in the continued increase in CO2 in our atmosphere, which is a principal cause of global warming, trapping sunlight and reflecting it back on the surface of the earth. All of our industries, the things that we wear, the food that we eat is tied into the consumption of oil products and byproducts, the fossil fuel industry. And in order to live in the kind of society that we live in, we cannot continue to have as many people on earth that we have today and that we will have over the next 30 years. If all the nations agreed with a decision to reduce their populations by 2/3, how would it be done? How would it be done soon enough to save humanity and to save the environment that we depend upon? Would each nation require voluntary suicide of 66% of its population? Or would they devise some kind of selection by lottery for extermination? Because the cold, hard facts point to the necessity for a reduction of human life on this planet. Because human consumption is the primary factor causing environmental breakdown. Of course, everyone wants to live, no matter how old they may be. A person 90 years old wants to live. A person 50 years old wants to live. So how would one go about making the decision to determine who would die in order to save humanity, assuming that no one will raise their hand, assuming that no one or very, very few people would voluntarily commit suicide to save humanity? There was a book I once read and I used in class, and it was written by a scientist by the name of Hawkins, and it was entitled The Selfish Gene. His basic premise in the book is that we are wired to be selfish. Everyone wants the largest slice of cake if they can get it. Everyone wants to live, if necessary, at the expense of everyone else. How would you go about structuring the reduction of the human population when every human being on earth wants to eat 3 meals a day, wants to drive in a car, use a cell phone, watch their computer, buy clothes, eat at restaurants, drive their cars? How would you go about organizing the reduction of the human population if no one wants to die? Even if it means the destruction, the extinction of the whole human race. That's how selfish individuals are, according to Richard Dawkins' book, The Selfish Gene. So who dies first in this scenario, in this possible scenario? All incarcerated people in all nations locked up in prisons should be left to die? Would you decide to do that? Every person over 80 years of age in all nations would be required to die in this scenario. Would that be agreeable to you? Would all 80-year-olds agree with that? A law that prohibits childbirth for 30 years. Would that be agreeable to everyone in order to save humanity? Would such people be willing to sacrifice their lives so that humanity might live? I don't think so. And how might they be killed? How might they be exterminated? Who would do the killing? Who would set up the lottery? Who would decide what groups go first? In case there are none who would voluntarily commit suicide. No altruism will we find under those circumstances. History proves to us the collapse of empires and civilizations thousands of years ago oftentimes resulted in cannibalism. In other words, people would eat their children and other people before they considered sacrificing themselves altruistically for the good of their own tribe or community. But here is the fact under this bleak scenario. If we reduce the global population to approximately 3 billion people, the human species can survive the increasing problems that will beset it by climate change. It won't be easy, and it won't be overnight. It will be a struggle that takes thousands of years to play out. But if not, in this first scenario, if that policy is not implemented, the human species will go extinct. We are in the 6th extinction. And by 2050, the phrase hell on earth will be appropriate to describe the panic and anxiety in people everywhere, just as depicted in this ant colony that is on nature's hit list because it has no queen. I am Dr. Stephen Nur Ahmed. Peace be unto you.